The auction block had never felt so cold beneath Eliza Harrington's bare feet as she stood before London's most elite society, her worn cotton dress a stark contrast to the silks and satins that adorned the crowd below. At 19, she possessed a haunting beauty that poverty could not diminish. Raven black hair that caught the gaslight like obsidian, violet eyes that held depths of intelligence and pain, and features so delicate they seemed carved from marble. But beauty meant nothing when you were being sold to pay your father's gambling debts, when whispered rumors of your family's disgrace preceded you like a plague. One by one, the gentlemen in the crowd turned away, their faces twisted with disdain as the auctioneer's voice grew more desperate with each declining bid. "Surely someone will take pity on this unfortunate creature," he pleaded, but the silence stretched like a death sentence. Eliza closed her eyes, preparing for the humiliation of being deemed worthless, when a voice cut through the crowd like a blade through silk, deep, commanding, and utterly unexpected. "I shall take her home." The words came from Duke Tristan Calderwood, the most powerful and mysterious man in England, whose dark reputation preceded him like storm clouds. As he stepped forward, his steel-grey eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath, Eliza realized that her life was about to change forever. What she didn't know was that this moment, this seemingly simple act of compassion, would unravel secrets, challenge the very foundations of society, and prove that sometimes the most broken souls are exactly what each other needs to become whole. The morning of October 12, 1824, dawned grey and merciless over London, as if the very sky conspired to match the darkness that had settled over Eliza Harrington's life. She stood in the cramped, damp cellar beneath Whitmore's auction house, her hands trembling not from the cold, but from the knowledge of what awaited her above. "Time to go, miss," the gruff attendant said, his voice carrying no sympathy for her plight. "The gentlemen are waiting." Eliza smoothed her worn cotton dress, the only decent garment she owned, and tried to summon what remained of her dignity. At 19, she had already endured more heartbreak than most women faced in a lifetime. Her father's gambling addiction had destroyed their family's modest fortune. Her mother had died of consumption the previous winter, and now she found herself the final asset to be liquidated to satisfy crushing debts. The auction house above buzzed with the excited chatter of London's elite, men who had come not out of genuine need for a companion or servant, but for the twisted entertainment of watching a gentlewoman's daughter reduced to chattel. The irony was not lost on Eliza. These same people had once welcomed her family into their drawing rooms, had praised her accomplishments in music and languages, had called her a charming young lady with excellent prospects. Miss Harrington, the auctioneer, a thin man with calculating eyes named Mr. Pembroke, approached with papers in hand. "I must inform you that the terms of sale are quite specific. Whoever purchases your services will own your labor for a period of 7 years to satisfy your father's debts of £3,000. "I understand," Eliza replied quietly, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. 7 years of servitude to strangers. 7 years of being treated as property rather than a person. "There is one other matter," Pembroke continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your father's reputation, the circumstances of his death, they have created certain expectations among the bidders." Eliza's stomach clenched. Her father had died 3 months ago, found in the Thames under circumstances that the authorities had deemed suspicious but inconclusive. Rumors swirled that he had been involved with dangerous men, that his debts extended beyond mere gambling to more sinister activities. Whether true or not, the whispers had destroyed what remained of Eliza's reputation. "What kind of expectations?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Many believe you may possess knowledge of your father's affairs that could prove valuable," Pembroke said carefully. "Others simply see an opportunity to acquire a well-educated young woman at a fraction of what a proper governess or companion would cost." The sound of footsteps on the stairs above indicated that the auction was about to begin. Eliza closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's voice, the gentle words of encouragement that had sustained her through their family's decline. "You are stronger than you know, my darling," her mother had whispered during her final days. "No matter what happens, remember that your worth is not determined by others' opinions or circumstances beyond your control." "It's time," Pembroke announced, and Eliza followed him up the narrow stairs toward her uncertain future. The auction room was packed with perhaps 50 men, their faces a mixture of curiosity, disdain, and something darker that made Eliza's skin crawl. She recognized several faces from her family's better days, men who had danced with her at balls, who had complimented her father on his charming daughter, who now looked at her as if she were a piece of furniture to be evaluated. "Gentlemen," Pembroke called out, his voice carrying over the murmur of conversation, "we come now to our final lot of the day. Miss Eliza Harrington, age 19, daughter of the late Mr. Charles Harrington. The young lady is well educated, speaks French and Italian fluently, plays the pianoforte, and is skilled in all the domestic arts expected of a gentlewoman." Eliza stood on the raised platform, her chin lifted despite the humiliation burning in her chest. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. "The terms of indenture are 7 years, with the purchase price to be applied against outstanding debts of £3,000, Pembroke continued. "Shall we begin the bidding at £50? Silence. Eliza felt her heart sink as not a single hand rose. The men in the crowd exchanged glances, whispered among themselves, but no one seemed willing to make an offer. "Perhaps £40, Pembroke tried again, his voice betraying a hint of desperation. "Surely a young woman of such accomplishments is worth £40. More whispers, more exchanged looks, but still no bids. Eliza heard fragments of conversation that made her stomach turn. Father was mixed up with dangerous people. Heard she might know where he hid stolen money. Too much trouble, that one. Probably knows things that could get a man killed. £30 then. Pembroke's voice was growing more strained. "Come now, gentlemen. Even as a scullery maid she would be worth £30. Lord Blackwood, a man Eliza remembered as a friend of her father's, stood up from his seat in the front row. For a moment, hope flickered in her chest. Perhaps someone would show mercy, would remember her family's former standing. "I'm afraid, Pembroke, that Miss Harrington comes with too much baggage for my taste," Blackwood announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "Her father's associates were not the sort of men a wise person crosses, and I have no desire to inherit his troubles along with his daughter." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Eliza felt her last hope crumble. They weren't just rejecting her because of poverty. They were afraid of her, afraid of whatever secrets they believed she might carry. £20? Pembroke tried desperately. "Surely someone—" "I wouldn't take her for free," called out another voice from the back. "Too dangerous by half." "Aye, let her find her own way," agreed another. "We don't need the troubles that come with the Harrington name." Eliza stood frozen on the platform, watching as one by one the men in the audience began to rise and head toward the exits. The humiliation was complete. She was being deemed not just worthless, but actively undesirable. "Gentlemen, please," Pembroke called out in desperation. "The debts must be satisfied somehow. Surely someone will take pity on this unfortunate creature." But the exodus continued, and Eliza realized with growing horror that she was about to become the first person in the history of Whitmore's auction house to receive no bids at all. What would happen to her then? Debtor's prison? The workhouse? The streets? Just as the last few stragglers were making their way toward the door, a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, deep, commanding, and utterly unexpected. "I shall take her home." The entire room froze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, footsteps halted, and every head turned toward the source of the voice. From the shadows near the back of the room, a figure stepped forward, and Eliza felt her breath catch in her throat. Duke Tristan Calderwood was perhaps the most powerful and mysterious man in all of England. At 32, he possessed the kind of dark, dangerous beauty that made women whisper behind their fans and men step carefully around him. His black hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour. His steel-grey eyes seemed to see everything and reveal nothing, and his tall, lean frame moved with the predatory grace of a man accustomed to command. More importantly, he was richer than Croesus and more influential than the Prince Regent himself. His vast estate stretched across 3 counties, his investments had made him one of the wealthiest men in Europe, and his political connections reached into the highest levels of government. He was also notoriously reclusive, rarely appearing in society, and never ever involving himself in anything as sordid as a debt auction. "Your Grace," Pembroke stammered, clearly as shocked as everyone else in the room. Are you making a bid?" "I am not bidding," Tristan said calmly, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "I am purchasing. Name your price for the young lady's indenture, and I shall pay it immediately." The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Lord Blackwood, who had been halfway to the door, turned back with his mouth agape. "But your Grace," he called out. "Surely you're aware of the complications surrounding the Harrington family?" Tristan's grey eyes fixed on Blackwood with an intensity that made the older man visibly shrink. "I am aware of many things, Blackwood. I am also capable of making my own decisions without your counsel." "The full amount of the debt is £3,000, Your Grace," Pembroke said quickly, sensing an opportunity to resolve his problem. "But surely we could arrange more reasonable terms." £3,000, Tristan repeated, pulling a leather portfolio from his coat. "I assume you accept bank drafts." "Of course, Your Grace, but then the matter is settled." Tristan wrote quickly on a piece of paper, signed it with a flourish, and handed it to the stunned auctioneer. "Miss Harrington's debts are now satisfied in full." Eliza stared at him in complete bewilderment. Why would the Duke of Calderwood, a man who could have his pick of any woman in England, purchase the indenture of a disgraced merchant's daughter? What could he possibly want with her? "Your Grace," she found her voice at last, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "I don't understand. Why would you—" Tristan looked up at her then, and Eliza felt as though those steel-grey eyes could see straight through to her soul. There was something in his gaze, not pity, not desire, but something deeper and more complex that she couldn't identify. "Because, Miss Harrington," he said quietly, "everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth, regardless of their circumstances." He turned to address the room at large, his voice carrying a note of authority that brooked no argument. "Gentlemen, I trust this matter will remain confidential. Miss Harrington is now under my protection, and I would be displeased if rumors or speculation about her situation were to circulate." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. No one in London was foolish enough to cross the Duke of Calderwood, and the men in the room nodded their understanding with varying degrees of nervousness. "Come, Miss Harrington," Tristan said, extending his hand toward the platform. "Let us leave this place." Eliza descended from the platform on unsteady legs, her mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. As she reached the floor, Tristan offered her his arm with the same courtesy he might show a duchess. "Your Grace," she said as they walked toward the exit, "I must ask, what do you expect of me? What are the terms of my service?" Tristan paused at the door and looked down at her with an expression she couldn't read. "We shall discuss that when we reach my home, Miss Harrington. For now, it is enough that you are safe." As they stepped out into the London evening, Eliza felt as though she were stepping into an entirely new life. Behind them, the auction house buzzed with excited conversation about the Duke's unexpected intervention. Ahead lay uncertainty, but for the first time in months it was uncertainty tinged with hope rather than despair. The carriage that awaited them was the finest Eliza had ever seen, black lacquer with the Calderwood coat of arms emblazoned in gold on the doors. A liveried footman helped her inside, and she found herself seated across from the most powerful man in England, wondering if she were living through a dream or a nightmare. "Your Grace," she said as the carriage began to move, "I must know. Why did you really purchase my indenture? Surely it wasn't mere compassion that motivated such a generous act." Tristan studied her for a long moment, his grey eyes unreadable in the dim light of the carriage lanterns. "You're right to be suspicious, Miss Harrington. In my experience, acts of pure altruism are rare indeed." "Then what do you want from me?" "What I want," Tristan said slowly, "is the truth about your father's death, and I believe you may be the only person who can provide it." Eliza felt her blood turn to ice. "I don't know anything about my father's business dealings, Your Grace. I was kept quite separate from that part of his life." "Perhaps," Tristan said, "but your father was involved in something that threatens people I care about, Miss Harrington, and whether you realize it or not, you may hold the key to preventing a great deal of suffering." As the carriage rolled through the darkened streets of London toward Calderwood House, Eliza realized that her rescue had come with a price she was only beginning to understand. The Duke's intervention had saved her from immediate disaster, but it had also entangled her in mysteries and dangers she couldn't yet comprehend. What secrets had her father taken to his grave? What did the Duke really know about her family's downfall? And most importantly, what would happen when he discovered that she truly knew nothing about the matters that had brought him to that auction house? The answers, she suspected, would determine not just her future, but possibly her very survival. Secrets and revelations. Calderwood House stood like a fortress against the London night, its imposing Georgian facade speaking of centuries of power and wealth. As their carriage pulled through the wrought-iron gates, Eliza marveled at the sheer scale of the Duke's residence, It was easily 3 times the size of her family's former home, with perfectly manicured gardens and enough windows to light a small village. "Welcome to your new home, Miss Harrington," Tristan said as the carriage came to a stop before the grand entrance. A small army of servants appeared as if by magic, their livery immaculate despite the late hour. The head butler, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, stepped forward to greet them. "Your Grace," he said with a bow, "welcome home. I trust your evening was productive." "Indeed it was, Harrison," Tristan replied, helping Eliza down from the carriage. "This is Miss Harrington. She will be staying with us indefinitely. Please see that the blue guest suite is prepared for her, and ask Mrs. Whitmore to attend to her needs." "Of course, Your Grace," Harrison replied, though Eliza caught a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Shall I have a tray sent up to Miss Harrington's room?" "That would be most kind," Eliza said, finding her voice at last. "I haven't eaten since this morning." "See that she has whatever she requires," Tristan instructed. "And Harrison? Miss Harrington's presence here is to remain confidential. No word of her arrival is to leave this house." "Understood completely, Your Grace." As they entered the grand foyer, Eliza was struck by the understated elegance of her surroundings. Unlike the ostentatious displays of wealth she had seen in other great houses, Calderwood House spoke of refined taste and genuine appreciation for beauty. The marble floors gleamed in the candlelight, priceless paintings adorned the walls, and fresh flowers filled crystal vases on every surface. "Mrs. Whitmore," Tristan called to a motherly woman who appeared from the servants' quarters, "please see that Miss Harrington has everything she needs. I'm sure she would appreciate a bath and fresh clothing." "Of course, Your Grace," the housekeeper replied with a warm smile for Eliza. "Come along, dear. Let's get you settled." "Your Grace," Eliza said, turning back to Tristan before following Mrs. Whitmore, "when will we, that is, when do you wish to discuss?" "Tomorrow morning," Tristan replied, "after you've had time to rest and recover from today's ordeal. We have much to discuss, Miss Harrington, but it can wait until you're ready." The blue guest suite was more luxurious than any room Eliza had ever occupied, even during her family's prosperous days. The sitting room was decorated in shades of cream and gold, with a cozy fireplace and comfortable chairs arranged near tall windows that overlooked the gardens. The bedroom beyond contained a 4-poster bed that could have slept 4 people, and the adjoining dressing room was larger than her family's entire parlor had been. "Now then, dear," Mrs. Whitmore said kindly, "let's see about getting you cleaned up. I've had the maids prepare a bath, and I've taken the liberty of selecting some clothing that should fit you reasonably well." "You're very kind," Eliza said, tears threatening at the unexpected gentleness after such a horrible day. "But I must ask, is this how His Grace typically treats his servants?" Mrs. Whitmore paused in her bustling about the room and fixed Eliza with a shrewd look. "His Grace doesn't have servants in the way you mean, dear. Everyone who works in this house is here by choice and is treated with respect and dignity. As for you," she smiled mysteriously, "I suspect you're not here as a servant at all, though I couldn't say what His Grace has in mind." After the most luxurious bath of her life, and a meal that was better than anything she had eaten in months, Eliza found herself alone in the elegant bedroom, wearing a silk nightgown that Mrs. Whitmore had somehow procured in her exact size. She stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens and trying to process the extraordinary events of the day. This morning she had awakened in a cramped boarding-house room, facing the prospect of being sold like cattle to pay her father's debts. Tonight she was a guest in one of London's finest homes, under the protection of one of England's most powerful men. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale. But fairy tales didn't usually involve mysterious deaths, dangerous secrets, and the kind of steel-eyed determination she had seen in the Duke's gaze. Whatever his reasons for rescuing her, Eliza was certain they had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with the information he believed she possessed about her father. The problem was, she truly didn't know anything about her father's business dealings beyond the fact that they had involved gambling and had ultimately led to his ruin. Charles Harrington had been a loving but distant father, more concerned with his cards and his debts than with sharing the details of his affairs with his daughter. A soft knock at her door interrupted her brooding. "Come in," she called, expecting to see Mrs. Whitmore or one of the maids. Instead, Duke Tristan Calderwood stepped into the room, and Eliza's breath caught in her throat. He had changed from his formal evening wear into a simple white shirt and dark trousers, and somehow the casual attire made him seem even more imposing than before. His black hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it, and there was a tension in his bearing that suggested he was struggling with some internal conflict. "Your Grace," Eliza said, pulling her silk wrapper more tightly around herself. "I wasn't expecting—" "Forgive the intrusion," Tristan said, though he made no move to leave. "I know this is highly improper, but I find myself unable to wait until morning for our conversation. What is so urgent that it cannot wait a few hours?" Tristan moved to the window where she had been standing, his gaze fixed on the gardens below. 3 days ago, my younger brother was found beaten nearly to death in an alley near the docks. The men who attacked him were looking for something they believed he had taken from your father. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "Your brother? Is he?" "He's alive, but barely. The physicians aren't certain he'll ever fully recover." Tristan's voice was carefully controlled, but Eliza could hear the pain beneath the calm exterior. "Before he lost consciousness, he managed to tell me that the men mentioned your father's name specifically." "I don't understand," Eliza said weakly, sinking into one of the chairs by the fireplace. "What could my father possibly have had that would interest dangerous men? He was a merchant, not a criminal." "Was he?" Tristan turned from the window to face her, his grey eyes intense. "Miss Harrington, your father owed money to some very dangerous people. When he couldn't pay, he offered them something else. Information, perhaps, or access to something valuable. What kind of information? That's what I need to find out." Tristan moved closer, and Eliza was struck by the barely contained energy that seemed to radiate from him. "My brother was investigating your father's death on my behalf. Someone clearly didn't want him to discover the truth." "Why were you investigating my father's death?" Eliza asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Tristan was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Because Charles Harrington was not the man you believed him to be, Miss Harrington. He was working as an informant for certain government officials, providing information about smuggling operations and other illegal activities along the London docks." The room seemed to spin around Eliza as she tried to process this revelation. "That's impossible. My father was a simple merchant who imported textiles and spices. That was his cover," Tristan said gently. "In reality, he was gathering intelligence about a network of criminals who have been using legitimate businesses to smuggle everything from contraband goods to enemy agents into England." "You're saying my father was a spy?" "I'm saying your father was a patriot who risked his life to serve his country," Tristan corrected. "Unfortunately, his cover was blown, and he paid the ultimate price for his service." Eliza stared at him in shock, her mind reeling as everything she thought she knew about her father crumbled around her. "If this is true, why wasn't I told? Why was I left to believe he died in disgrace?" "Because the work he was doing was classified at the highest levels of government," Tristan explained. "Even now, very few people know the truth about his activities. Your father specifically requested that you be kept ignorant of his real work to protect you from exactly the kind of danger that has now found my brother. But if I don't know anything about his work, why do these men think I have something they want?" "Because your father was killed before he could deliver his final report," Tristan said grimly. "The information he had gathered about the smuggling network died with him, and his enemies believe he may have hidden evidence somewhere that could expose their operations. And they think I know where this evidence is hidden? They think you might have access to it, yes. Your father's personal effects, his papers, anything he might have left behind could contain clues to the location of information that could destroy some very powerful and dangerous people." Eliza felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was learning. Her father, whom she had mourned as a failed merchant who died in disgrace, had actually been a hero who sacrificed everything for his country. And now she was caught in the middle of whatever deadly game he had been playing. "Your Grace," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. When my father died, we had already lost everything. Our house, our belongings, even my mother's jewelry. It was all sold to pay debts. I have nothing left of his. No papers, no personal effects, nothing that could possibly contain the information these men are seeking." Tristan studied her face intently, as if trying to determine whether she was telling the truth. "You're certain? There's nothing? No letters, no documents, no items he might have given you for safekeeping?" "Nothing," Eliza confirmed. "I've been living in a boarding house for the past 3 months, surviving on the charity of strangers. If I had anything of value, don't you think I would have sold it long ago?" "Perhaps the value isn't monetary," Tristan suggested. "Something that might seem worthless to you could be invaluable to the right person." Eliza tried to think, to remember anything her father might have said or done in his final days that seemed unusual. "There was one thing," she said slowly. A few days before he died, he gave me a book, a collection of poetry by Lord Byron. He said it had belonged to my mother and that I should always keep it with me. Do you still have this book? Yes, it's the only thing I managed to keep when everything else was sold. It's in my bag downstairs. Tristan's eyes sharpened with interest. May I see it? Of course, but I don't understand what a book of poetry could possibly have to do with smuggling or government secrets. Sometimes the most innocuous items can hide the most important secrets, Tristan said, moving toward the door. I'll have Harrison retrieve your belongings immediately. Within minutes, Harrison appeared with Eliza's small traveling bag, the pathetic sum total of her worldly possessions. She retrieved the book, a slim volume bound in worn leather, and handed it to Tristan with trembling fingers. He examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands and running his fingers along the binding. It's been rebound recently, he observed. See here, where the leather is newer than the rest? I wouldn't know, Eliza admitted. I never paid much attention to such details. Tristan opened the book and began flipping through the pages, his expression growing more intent with each passing moment. Suddenly he stopped, his finger tracing something on one of the pages. Miss Harrington, he said quietly. Look at this. Eliza moved closer, close enough to catch the scent of his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. On the page he indicated certain letters in the printed text had been marked with tiny, almost invisible dots. What does it mean? She asked. It's a code, Tristan said, his voice filled with excitement. Your father hid his final report in this book, using a system of marked letters to spell out his message. Miss Harrington, you've been carrying the information that could expose an entire network of traitors and criminals. Eliza stared at the innocent-looking book in horror. You mean those men who hurt your brother? They were right. I do have what they're looking for. You have it. But more importantly, you're safe now, Tristan said firmly. No one knows you're here, and no one will harm you while you're under my protection. But your brother. My brother's sacrifice will not be in vain, Tristan said, his voice hard with determination. We're going to decode this message, expose the criminals your father died trying to stop, and make sure that justice is finally served. As Eliza looked into Tristan's steel-gray eyes, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Not just determination and anger, but a fierce protectiveness that seemed directed specifically at her. Whatever his original motives for rescuing her from the auction, she was beginning to suspect that his feelings about her situation were becoming more personal than professional. Your Grace, she said softly, why are you really helping me? The truth, please. Tristan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel as though he could see straight through to her soul. Because, he said finally, watching you stand on that auction platform tonight, seeing the way those men looked at you as if you were nothing more than an object to be purchased, it reminded me that there are still things in this world worth fighting for. And you, Miss Harrington, are definitely worth fighting for. The words hung in the air between them, charged with an emotion that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Eliza felt her cheeks burn with a blush that had nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with the way Tristan was looking at her, as if she were precious, valuable, worthy of protection and care. I should let you rest, Tristan said, though he made no immediate move toward the door. Tomorrow we'll begin the work of decoding your father's message. It may take some time, and it will certainly be dangerous once word gets out that we have the information these criminals are seeking. I'm not afraid, Eliza said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. If my father died trying to protect England from these people, then I want to help finish what he started. You're braver than you know, Tristan said softly, and the admiration in his voice made Eliza's heart race. Good night, Miss Harrington. Sleep well, and don't worry about anything. You're safe here. After he left, Eliza sat by the dying fire, holding the book that had unknowingly carried such dangerous secrets. Her father hadn't been the failure she had believed him to be. He had been a hero, a patriot who had given his life in service to his country. And now, she had the chance to honor his memory by helping to complete his final mission. More than that, she was beginning to realize that her rescue by the Duke of Calderwood might not have been the simple act of charity she had first believed. There was something in the way he looked at her, something in the protective tone of his voice, that suggested his interest in her went beyond her value as a source of information. As she prepared for bed, Eliza found herself wondering what the morning would bring. Would they be able to decode her father's message? Would they be able to expose the criminals he had died trying to stop? And perhaps most importantly, what would happen between her and the mysterious Duke who had saved her from a fate worse than death? Whatever the answers, Eliza knew that her life had changed forever the moment Tristan Calderwood stepped forward in that auction house and declared his intention to take her home. The question now was whether that change would lead to happiness or heartbreak, or perhaps both. Dangerous discoveries. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Eliza awoke in the luxurious bed feeling more rested than she had in months. For a moment, she lay still, wondering if the events of the previous day had been nothing more than an elaborate dream. But the silk sheets beneath her fingers and the elegant room around her confirmed that her rescue by the Duke of Calderwood had been very real indeed. A soft knock at her door announced the arrival of a young maid carrying a breakfast tray and fresh clothing. "Good morning, miss," the girl said with a cheerful smile. "I'm Sarah. Mrs. Whitmore sent me to help you dress and to let you know that His Grace is waiting for you in the library whenever you're ready." "Thank you, Sarah," Eliza replied, accepting the tray gratefully. "How is His Grace this morning? Did he sleep well?" Sarah's expression grew concerned. "I don't think His Grace slept at all, miss. He's been in the library since before dawn, working with that book you gave him. Mrs. Whitmore is quite worried about him." Eliza felt a pang of guilt. Tristan had spent the night working to decode her father's message while she slept peacefully in his guest room. She ate quickly and dressed in the simple but elegant morning dress that had been provided, then made her way downstairs to the library. She found Tristan exactly as Sarah had described, sitting at a massive oak desk surrounded by papers, books, and what appeared to be several different attempts at deciphering the coded message. His dark hair was disheveled, his shirt sleeves were rolled up, and there were dark circles under his grey eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. "Your Grace," Eliza said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Have you been working all night?" Tristan looked up from his papers, and despite his obvious exhaustion, his face lit up when he saw her. "Miss Harrington." "Yes, I'm afraid I became rather absorbed in the puzzle your father left us. Please come and see what I've discovered." Eliza approached the desk, noting the methodical way Tristan had organized his work. He had copied out the marked letters from multiple pages of the poetry book, arranged them in various patterns, and filled several sheets with different attempts at creating coherent words and sentences. "It's more complex than I initially thought," Tristan explained, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Your father didn't simply mark letters to spell out words. He used a substitution cipher, where each marked letter represents a different letter of the alphabet." "How can you tell?" Eliza asked, genuinely curious about the process. "Frequency analysis," Tristan replied, pointing to a chart he had created. "In English, certain letters appear more often than others. The letter E is the most common, followed by T, A, and so on. By counting how often each marked letter appears in your father's code, I can make educated guesses about which coded letter represents which actual letter." "That's remarkably clever," Eliza said, impressed by both her father's ingenuity and Tristan's analytical skills. "Have you made any progress?" "Some," Tristan said, pulling out a sheet covered with partial words and phrases. "I believe I've identified several key words: ship, warehouse, gold, and what might be Thursday. But I'm missing too many letters to make complete sense of the message." Eliza studied the papers, trying to see patterns that might have escaped Tristan's notice. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the original book. "Of course." As Eliza flipped through the pages, something caught her attention. "Your Grace, look at this. The marked letters don't just appear in the printed text. There are also tiny marks in the margins, so small they're almost invisible." Tristan leaned closer, close enough that Eliza could feel his breath on her cheek as he examined the page she indicated. "You're absolutely right. How did I miss that?" "Perhaps because you were looking for one type of code when my father actually used two," Eliza suggested. "What if the marked letters in the text are only part of the message, and the marginal marks provide additional information?" "Brilliant," Tristan breathed, his admiration evident in his voice. "Miss Harrington, you may have just solved the puzzle that kept me awake all night." Working together, they began the painstaking process of identifying and cataloging every mark in the book, both obvious and subtle. As they worked, Eliza became increasingly aware of Tristan's presence beside her, the way his fingers brushed hers when they reached for the same page, the intensity of his concentration, the occasional smile that transformed his stern features when they made a breakthrough. "There," Tristan said finally, after 2 hours of meticulous work. "I think we have everything." Using the additional marks Eliza had discovered, the coded message began to take shape with startling clarity. As Tristan read the decoded text aloud, both of them realized the magnitude of what Charles Harrington had uncovered. The Meridian Company is a front for French agents. Gold shipments arrive Thursday nights at Warehouse 7, Rotherhithe Docks. Contact is Henri Dubois, posing as wine merchant. Ships carry more than cargo, enemy agents and stolen military plans. Lord Pemberton is the English contact. Evidence hidden in company ledgers, third-floor office behind false wall. Trust no one in government except Calderwood. The silence that followed was deafening. Eliza stared at the decoded message, her mind reeling from the implications. "Lord Pemberton," she said finally. "Isn't he the same man who conducted the auction last night?" "The very same," Tristan confirmed grimly. "Which means he knows exactly who you are and what you might possess. Miss Harrington, you were never in danger from random criminals. You were being hunted by a network of traitors, operating at the highest levels of society." "But why didn't they simply kill me?" Eliza asked, though the question made her shudder. "Because they needed to know what you knew first," Tristan explained. "If you had already shared your father's secrets with someone else, killing you would only have made them more enemies. The auction was a way to acquire you legally, to question you thoroughly, and then dispose of you quietly if necessary." "And you saved me from that fate," Eliza said softly, looking at Tristan with new understanding. "You knew, didn't you? You knew what that auction really was." Tristan met her gaze steadily. "I suspected. When my brother told me about the connection to your father, I began investigating. I discovered that several men with ties to Pemberton had been asking questions about you, and when I learned about the auction, I realized it was a trap. So you came to rescue me." "I came to prevent you from falling into the hands of murderers and traitors," Tristan corrected. "What I didn't expect was—" "What?" "I didn't expect to find myself so completely captivated by you," Tristan said quietly, his grey eyes intense with emotion. "Eliza, what began as a mission to protect an innocent woman has become something much more personal." The use of her given name sent warmth flooding through Eliza's chest. "Tristan," she said, testing the sound of his name on her lips. "What happens now? We have the information my father died to protect, but how do we use it without putting ourselves in even greater danger?" "We take it to the only person your father trusted, the Prime Minister himself," Tristan replied. "But first, we need to gather the evidence your father mentioned. The ledgers hidden in the Meridian Company office could provide the proof we need to expose the entire network." "That sounds extremely dangerous." "It is," Tristan agreed, "which is why you're going to remain here, safely hidden, while I handle the retrieval." "Absolutely not," Eliza said firmly, surprising them both with her vehemence. "My father died for this information, and I will not hide in safety while you risk your life to complete his mission." "Eliza, these people have already killed your father and nearly killed my brother. I will not allow them to harm you as well. And I will not allow you to face this danger alone," Eliza countered. "Besides, you may need my help. I know my father's handwriting, his methods of hiding information. If there are additional codes or hidden messages in those ledgers, I might be the only person who can recognize them." Tristan stared at her for a long moment, and Eliza could see the internal struggle playing out in his expression. His desire to protect her warring with his recognition that she might be right about her usefulness to the mission. "If I agree to let you come," he said finally, "you must promise to follow my instructions exactly. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. At the first sign of danger, you do exactly as I say, without question." "I promise," Eliza said solemnly. "Very well, but we'll need to be extremely careful. Pemberton will be watching for any sign that we've discovered the truth, and the Meridian Company office will likely be guarded." They spent the rest of the morning planning their approach to the Meridian Company building. Tristan's knowledge of London's criminal underworld, combined with his extensive network of contacts, allowed them to gather detailed information about the building's layout, security measures, and the schedules of its occupants. "The best time to attempt entry will be tomorrow night," Tristan concluded. "There's a social gathering at the French embassy that both Pemberton and Dubois are expected to attend. With them occupied elsewhere, we should be able to access the office with minimal risk of discovery." As they worked together throughout the day, Eliza found herself increasingly drawn to Tristan's intelligence, his determination, and the protective tenderness he showed toward her. Despite the dangerous circumstances that had brought them together, she was beginning to realize that her feelings for her rescuer were developing into something far deeper than gratitude. "Tristan," she said that evening as they dined together in his private study, May I ask you something personal? Of course. Why have you never married? Surely a man of your position and wealth has had countless opportunities. Tristan was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass as he considered his answer. I suppose I never found anyone who made me want to risk my heart, he said finally. My parents had a marriage of convenience that was polite but cold. I swore I would never settle for such an arrangement, but I also never believed I would find the kind of love that would make marriage worthwhile. And now? Eliza asked softly. Tristan looked up at her, his grey eyes intense with emotion. Now I find myself wondering if I was wrong about many things. About love, about marriage, about the possibility of finding someone who could make me want to be a better man. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Eliza felt her heart racing as she realized that Tristan's feelings for her were as deep and complex as her own feelings for him. Eliza, Tristan said, rising from his chair and moving to kneel beside hers. I know this is neither the time nor the place for such declarations, but I need you to know. What I feel for you goes far beyond duty or protection. You have captured my heart completely, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Tristan, Eliza whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I feel the same way. When I stood on that auction platform last night, I thought my life was over. But you didn't just save me from those men. You saved me from despair, from believing I was worthless. You've shown me that I'm worthy of protection, of care, of love. Tristan reached up to cup her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall down her cheeks. You are worthy of everything good in this world, Eliza. You are brave, intelligent, beautiful, and stronger than you know. Any man would be honored to call you his own. But I don't want any man, Eliza said softly, leaning into his touch. I want you, Tristan. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of our situation, despite everything that brought us together, I want you. The kiss that followed was tender but passionate, filled with all the emotion they had been holding back since the moment they met. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, and Eliza could see her own wonder and joy reflected in Tristan's grey eyes. I love you, Tristan said simply, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. I love you too, Eliza replied, and felt as though her heart might burst with happiness despite the dangerous circumstances surrounding them. When this is over, Tristan said, his voice rough with emotion, when we've exposed these traitors and ensured your safety, I want to court you properly. I want to give you the kind of romance you deserve, the kind of marriage that's based on love rather than convenience or necessity. I would like that very much, Eliza said with a smile that made Tristan's heart race. But first, we have a mission to complete. The next evening, Eliza found herself dressed in dark clothing and following Tristan through the shadowy streets of London toward the Meridian Company building. Despite her earlier bravado, she was nervous about what they might encounter, but her determination to honor her father's memory and help Tristan complete his mission outweighed her fear. Remember, Tristan whispered as they approached the building, we go in quietly, find the ledgers, and get out without being seen. If anything goes wrong, you run immediately and don't look back. I understand, Eliza replied, though privately she had no intention of abandoning Tristan if they encountered trouble. The Meridian Company occupied a narrow, four-story building in a commercial district near the docks. Using skills that made Eliza wonder about his past, Tristan quickly picked the lock on a side entrance and led her through darkened corridors toward the stairs. Third floor, he whispered, and they began their careful ascent. The office they sought was at the end of a long hallway, and Tristan made quick work of its lock as well. Inside, they found a typical merchant's office. Desk, chairs, filing cabinets and shelves lined with ledgers and account books. Your father said the evidence was hidden behind a false wall, Tristan reminded her as they began their search. Eliza moved systematically around the room, running her hands along the walls and listening for hollow sounds that might indicate hidden spaces. It was behind a bookshelf that she found what they were looking for, a section of wall that sounded different when tapped. Here, she whispered, and Tristan joined her in examining the area more closely. Hidden behind a cleverly concealed panel, they discovered a cache of documents that made Charles Harrington's coded message seem tame by comparison. The ledgers detailed not just gold shipments and smuggling operations, but a comprehensive network of French spies operating throughout England, complete with names, locations, and detailed plans for sabotage operations. My God, Tristan breathed as he flipped through the documents. This is far worse than we imagined. They're not just smuggling goods. They're planning to assassinate key government officials and military leaders. Look at this, Eliza said, pointing to a list of names that made her blood run cold. The Prime Minister, the Secretary of War, the Admiral of the Fleet. They're planning to decapitate the entire British government. And according to this timeline, the attacks are scheduled to begin next week, Tristan added grimly. We need to get this information to the authorities immediately. As they gathered the most incriminating documents, a sound from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, approaching their location. Someone's coming, Tristan whispered, quickly stuffing the papers inside his coat. The window? Can you climb down? Eliza looked out the window and saw a narrow ledge that ran along the building's exterior. It was dangerous, but not impossible. I think so. Go, Tristan urged, helping her onto the ledge. I'll be right behind you. But as Eliza began her careful progress along the ledge, she heard voices from inside the office. Voices she recognized with a chill of terror. Search everything, Lord Pemberton was saying. If Calderwood and the girl have been here, I want to know what they found. The panel's been opened, another voice reported. The documents are gone. Then we're too late, Pemberton snarled. Find them. Search every building in the district if necessary, but find them before they can deliver those papers to anyone. Eliza pressed herself against the building's wall, her heart pounding as she realized they had walked into a trap. Somehow Pemberton had known they would come here, had been waiting for them to reveal themselves. From inside the office, she heard the sound of a struggle, followed by Tristan's voice, strained but defiant. You're too late, Pemberton. The information is already in safe hands. I don't think so, Pemberton replied coldly. You see, we've been watching your house, Calderwood. We know the girl is with you, and we know you came here together tonight. Where is she? Gone, Tristan said simply. And if you harm me, she'll make sure those documents reach the Prime Minister within hours. Perhaps, Pemberton mused, but I think Miss Harrington is too sentimental to abandon the man who saved her. I think she's still here, listening to every word, trying to decide whether to save herself or attempt some foolish rescue. Eliza's blood ran cold as she realized Pemberton was right. She couldn't abandon Tristan, not when he had risked everything to protect her and complete her father's mission. Miss Harrington, Pemberton called out, his voice carrying through the open window. I know you can hear me. Come back inside and we can discuss this situation like civilized people. Continue hiding, and I'm afraid the Duke will suffer the same fate as your father. The threat was clear, and Eliza knew she had no choice. Carefully, she made her way back along the ledge and climbed through the window into the office. Ah, there you are, Pemberton said with a cold smile. How touching. True love conquers common sense once again. Tristan was being held by two large men, his hands bound behind his back, but his eyes blazed with fury when he saw Eliza. You should have run, he said quietly. I couldn't leave you, Eliza replied, then turned to face Pemberton with as much dignity as she could muster. What do you want? What I've always wanted, Pemberton replied. The complete destruction of the intelligence network your father helped to build. You see, Miss Harrington, your father wasn't just gathering information about our operations. He was systematically dismantling years of careful planning. Good, Eliza said defiantly. I'm proud of what my father accomplished. Are you? Pemberton asked with amusement. Even knowing that his actions led directly to his death, even knowing that your current predicament is entirely his fault. My father died serving his country, Eliza said firmly. That's more than can be said for traitors like you. Pemberton's expression darkened. Your father died because he was a fool who thought he could play games with people far more dangerous than himself. And you, my dear, are about to learn the same lesson. Actually, a new voice said from the doorway, I think the only lesson being learned tonight is that traitors eventually face justice. Everyone turned to see a group of armed men entering the office, led by a distinguished gentleman in military uniform whom Eliza recognized as General Morrison, one of the highest-ranking officers in the British Army. General Morrison, Pemberton said, his confidence wavering for the first time. What brings you here at this hour? A very interesting message from the Duke of Calderwood, Morrison replied calmly. It seems he anticipated that you might attempt to intercept him tonight, so he took the precaution of delivering copies of certain documents to my office before embarking on this evening's adventure. Eliza looked at Tristan in amazement. You knew this was a trap? I suspected, Tristan admitted, as Morrison's men moved to arrest Pemberton and his associates. The timing was too convenient, the information too easy to obtain. I made copies of the most important documents this afternoon and arranged for them to be delivered to General Morrison if we didn't return by midnight. You used us as bait, Eliza realized. I used myself as bait, Tristan corrected. You were supposed to stay safely at home, remember? Lord Pemberton, General Morrison announced formally, you are under arrest for high treason, conspiracy against the Crown, and the murder of Charles Harrington. Anything you say may be used against you in court. As Pemberton and his men were led away in chains, Eliza felt a profound sense of relief mixed with grief for her father. Justice was finally being served, but it had come at such a terrible cost. It's over, Tristan said softly, taking her in his arms as soon as his bonds were cut. Your father's mission is complete. The traitors have been exposed and you're safe. What happens now? Eliza asked, leaning into his embrace. Now, General Morrison interjected with a smile, the Crown expresses its gratitude to both of you for your service to England. Miss Harrington, your father would be very proud of your courage tonight. Thank you, General, Eliza replied, tears streaming down her face. I just wish he could have lived to see justice done. He lives on in the work he accomplished, and in the daughter who helped complete his mission, Morrison said kindly. And speaking of which, there will be a substantial reward for the information you've provided, enough to ensure that you never again face the kind of financial difficulties that led to last night's auction. As they left the Meridian Company building, Eliza marveled at how completely her life had changed in just 2 days. She had gone from being a destitute orphan sold at auction to being a hero who had helped expose a network of traitors threatening the very foundations of British society. Tristan, she said, as they rode back to Calderwood House in his carriage, do you really think it's over? Are we truly safe now? The immediate threat is ended, Tristan replied, pulling her close against his side. Pemberton and his associates will face trial and execution, and the French spy network has been completely exposed. But more importantly, you're free now, Eliza. Free from debt, free from danger, free to choose your own future. And what future do you think I should choose? Eliza asked with a smile that made Tristan's heart race. I think, Tristan said, leaning down to kiss her gently, you should choose to marry a man who loves you desperately and wants to spend the rest of his life making you happy. That sounds like an excellent plan, Eliza replied, provided that man is you. Always me, Tristan confirmed. Only me, for the rest of our lives. Love's triumph. 3 months later, Eliza stood before the mirror in the bridal suite at Calderwood House, marveling at the woman reflected back at her. The exquisite wedding gown of ivory silk and Brussels lace had been designed specifically for her by London's finest modiste, and the sapphire necklace at her throat, a wedding gift from Tristan, sparkled in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. You look absolutely radiant, my dear, said Lady Catherine Morrison, General Morrison's wife, who had become something of a mother figure to Eliza during the weeks leading up to the wedding. The Duke is going to be speechless when he sees you. I hope so, Eliza replied with a nervous laugh. Though knowing Tristan, he'll probably have something perfectly romantic to say that will make me cry and ruin my cosmetics. Happy tears are the best kind, Lady Catherine said with a warm smile. And after everything you've been through, you deserve nothing but happiness. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of activity. The trial of Lord Pemberton and his co-conspirators had been the sensation of London society, with Eliza and Tristan testifying as key witnesses to the treasonous plot. The revelation that Charles Harrington had been a hero rather than a disgraced merchant had completely restored the family's reputation, and Eliza found herself welcomed into the highest circles of society. More importantly, the reward money from the government had made her financially independent for the first time in her life. She no longer needed to marry for security or survival. She was choosing to marry Tristan purely for love, and that knowledge made their upcoming union even more precious. Miss Harrington, Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the doorway, her eyes bright with unshed tears. It's time. His Grace is waiting for you in the chapel. The chapel at Calderwood House was small but exquisite, decorated with white roses and trailing ivy for the intimate ceremony. As Eliza walked down the aisle, she was struck by how different this moment felt from that terrible day at the auction house. Then, she had been surrounded by men who saw her as an object to be purchased. Now she was surrounded by friends who had come to celebrate her happiness, but her attention was focused entirely on the man waiting for her at the altar. Tristan looked magnificent in his formal wedding attire, but it was the expression on his face that took her breath away, love wonder and absolute devotion shining in his grey eyes as he watched her approach. "Dearly beloved," the chaplain began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Tristan Alexander Calderwood, Duke of Calderwood, and Eliza Margaret Harrington, in the bonds of holy matrimony." As the ceremony proceeded, Eliza found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a rescue from desperate circumstances had become the greatest love story she could have imagined. Tristan had not only saved her from physical danger, but had shown her that she was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. "Do you, Tristan Alexander, take Eliza Margaret to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," Tristan said, his voice strong and clear, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. "Do you, Eliza Margaret, take Tristan Alexander to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," Eliza replied, her voice trembling with emotion. When Tristan slipped the wedding ring onto her finger, Eliza felt as though her transformation was complete. She was no longer the desperate young woman who had stood on that auction platform, but the Duchess of Calderwood, wife to the man she loved more than life itself. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the chaplain announced. "You may kiss your bride." The kiss was tender but passionate, filled with all the love and promise of their future together. When they broke apart, both were glowing with happiness, and the small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. "I love you, Duchess Calderwood," Tristan whispered against her ear as they walked back down the aisle together. "I love you too, Your Grace," Eliza replied, her heart so full of joy she thought it might burst. The wedding breakfast was held in the grand ballroom of Calderwood House, where the guests, a carefully selected group of close friends and family, celebrated the union with champagne toasts and heartfelt speeches. General Morrison spoke movingly about Charles Harrington's service to his country and the courage his daughter had shown in completing his mission. Lady Catherine toasted the power of love to overcome any obstacle, and Tristan's brother, who had recovered from his injuries and insisted on attending despite his doctor's concerns, raised his glass to "the woman who saved my brother's heart and helped save England." "Ladies and gentlemen," Tristan said when it came time for his own speech, "3 months ago I attended an auction thinking I was going to rescue a young woman in distress. What I didn't expect was that she would end up rescuing me instead." He turned to look at Eliza, his eyes bright with love and gratitude. "Eliza, you have shown me what it means to be truly brave, truly noble, and truly alive. You have transformed my life in ways I never thought possible, and I promise to spend every day of our marriage proving myself worthy of your love." "You already have," Eliza said softly, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I will love you for the rest of my life." As the celebration continued into the evening, Eliza found herself reflecting on the miraculous turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been watching her family's fortune crumble around her. 3 months ago, she had been sold at auction like a piece of property. Tonight, she was the Duchess of Calderwood, married to the most wonderful man in England, with a future bright with possibilities. "What are you thinking about?" Tristan asked as they danced together in the ballroom, surrounded by their friends, but lost in their own world. "I'm thinking about destiny," Eliza replied, "about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best ones. If my father hadn't died, if I hadn't been sold at auction, if you hadn't been there to save me, we might never have found each other. I would have found you eventually," Tristan said with certainty. "Somehow, somewhere, we would have found each other. Some things are simply meant to be." "Do you really believe that?" "I believe that love like ours doesn't happen by accident," Tristan said, spinning her gracefully around the dance floor. "I believe we were meant to save each other, to complete each other, to build something beautiful together." As the evening wound down and their guests began to depart, Eliza and Tristan found themselves alone in the ballroom, still swaying to music only they could hear. "Are you ready to begin our honeymoon, my Duchess?" Tristan asked, his voice low and intimate. "I'm ready to begin our life together," Eliza replied, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "Our real life, built on love and trust and partnership." "Our real life," Tristan agreed, leaning down to kiss her with all the passion and tenderness he felt. "Starting right now." Love's legacy. 5 years later, Eliza stood in the nursery of Calderwood House, watching Tristan read bedtime stories to their twin daughters, Charlotte and Margaret, while their infant son, Charles, named for Eliza's father, slept peacefully in his cradle. The scene was one of perfect domestic happiness, and Eliza felt the same surge of gratitude that had become her constant companion since the day Tristan saved her from that auction. "Mama," 4-year-old Charlotte called out, "Papa says you were once a princess in disguise who was rescued by a brave duke. Is that true?" "Something like that," Eliza replied with a laugh, settling into the rocking chair beside her daughter's bed. "Though I think the duke was the one who needed rescuing." "From what?" Margaret asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "From a life without love," Tristan said softly, meeting Eliza's gaze across the room. "Your mother taught me that the most important treasures in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely, from one heart to another." After the children were asleep, Eliza and Tristan walked together through the gardens of their estate, enjoying the peaceful evening air and the comfortable silence of a couple who had found perfect harmony together. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked suddenly. "Giving up your bachelor freedom to marry a woman you met at an auction?" Tristan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Eliza, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You didn't just become my wife. You became my partner, my best friend, my greatest love. I can't imagine my life without you in it. Even knowing that our marriage began with such unusual circumstances, especially knowing that," Tristan said firmly, "our love story proves that the most beautiful relationships can bloom from the most unlikely soil. We found each other in the darkest moment of your life, and together we built something that will last forever." "I love you," Eliza said simply, the words carrying all the depth of feeling that had grown between them over the years. "I love you too," Tristan replied, pulling her into his arms. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the tomorrows we'll share." As they stood together in the moonlit garden, surrounded by the roses that bloomed year after year in testament to enduring beauty, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment of perfect contentment. She had been rejected at that auction, deemed worthless by men who couldn't see past their own prejudices and fears. But Tristan had stepped forward and declared his intention to take her home, and in doing so had given her not just safety and security, but the greatest gift of all, true love. Their story would be told for generations as proof that sometimes the most broken souls are exactly what each other needs to become whole, that love can triumph over any obstacle, and that the most precious treasures are often found in the most unexpected places. The woman who had once stood on an auction block, rejected and alone, had become a duchess, a mother, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth. And the duke who had saved her had discovered that in rescuing her, he had rescued himself as well. Eliza and Tristan's story reminds us that our darkest moments often precede our greatest triumphs. When Eliza stood rejected and alone on that auction platform, she could never have imagined that her rescue would come in the form of true love and a partnership that would transform both their lives forever. Their journey teaches us that worth is not determined by circumstances, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually a beautiful beginning. Eliza's courage in the face of adversity and Tristan's willingness to see beyond surface appearances created a love story that proves the power of compassion, bravery, and hope. May their love inspire you to believe that no matter how dark your current circumstances may seem, there is always the possibility of rescue, redemption, and a love that will transform your life in ways you never thought possible. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the words, "I shall take her home." Subscribe for more captivating historical romances where love conquers all odds and heroes emerge in the most unexpected moments. Discover stories that prove true love can transform even the darkest circumstances into the brightest futures. Comment: which moment in Eliza and Tristan's journey moved you the most? Your next breathtaking romance adventure awaits.